We're deep in this community, and to lose that would be a blow not just to Massey University, but to science in the whole country. And I honestly believe that.
Professor James Dale, Professor of Zoology at Massey University, thank you very much for your time. Victoria Stewart, you've heard what Professor Dale says there. Restructures, nothing new to institutions, organisation. This seems to be quite a big one. That idea moving away perhaps from face-to-face into the digital arena. How do you see this?
Well, I see it as a future, sadly, and I think this is a question of viability. I mean, I feel very sorry when you listen to people like Professor Dale and the impact it's going to have, but I mean, I have personal concerns about the viability of the number of universities we have in New Zealand. I think we've got 6 or 7, and even, just segueing slightly, we've got 6 law schools churning out hundreds of law students each year. There aren't the jobs for them, and I think it's probably similar in some other areas of study, and I think there would be some merit in the country streamlining what it does.
Hayden?
Yeah, I mean, that's possibly true, but I think what James Dale talks about in his article is that there seems to be some sort of Auckland versus Palmerston North element here as well. That maybe he has a better case that they have to streamline this university to say 5.1 million, but maybe he has a case that actually the Albany office has a better case to survive than maybe the Palmerston North one, but they don't have seats on the leadership board. I don't know.
Yes, but let's bear in mind this is just a proposal that's been consulted on, and the university is, legally obliged to take into account everything.
Your thoughts, welcome with that. You can email the panel at rnz.co.nz. We might follow it up. 2 minutes away from the end of the show now to this. Ever noticed more and more book covers have having resorted to coarse language to get attention? There was the Go the F to Sleep in 2011, and ever since, titles have been vying for attention with a barrage of coarse titles. The winning formula continues with You Have to Effing Eat and F Now, There Are Two of You, and of course the subtle art of not giving a F. And then riding on that huge success was F Happiness, etc., etc., etc. Writes Donna Mazza, a senior lecturer in creative arts at the Edith Cowan University. Resorting to coarse language on book covers could be a symptom of today's collective misery. Round the panel, what do you think? Hayden, you first. You're a millennial. You'd endorse the profanities on book covers?
I think she talks about it being a symptom of actually sort of literary decline, and that you actually have to really shock people to get them to purchase books anymore. I think that's probably true to an extent. There's a naughtiness to saying the F word. I mean, I can't say it on Radio New Zealand. Imagine if I could. Imagine. But I just think it's, I don't know, I think it's a bit silly. Isn't it? It's weird. We're apes that have evolved and decided that some sounds are kind of naughty. I don't know.
Is it liberating, Victoria, or is it a bit cloying? The constant grab for attention with these profane titles. What do you think?
Look, I get that it was originally liberating, but I think it shows a distinct lack of imagination now. I think people need to get onto it and go back to sort of more traditional titles.
Yeah, use more innovative insults.
Yeah.
Find different ways of skewering people and making them feel bad.
Hayden, you boomer.
Yes. Boy, the feedback. And drop the F-bomb.
I didn't get to articulate my argument at length.
Victoria Stewart, Hayden Donnell, thank you very much for your time. I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow from 3:45. Checkpoint next. See ya.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, suicidal workers, unpaid debt and families breaking apart. Minister Phil Twyford hears firsthand the effects of coronavirus on Tairāwhiti forestry workers. So where are the replacement jobs coming from and how long will it take? People laid off because of COVID-19 are forced to dip into KiwiSaver on hardship grounds. And are the elderly being ignored in planning for an outbreak? The aged care sector isn't convinced DHBs are ready for the worst. 9 years on from the Christchurch quakes, guess how many people are still waiting to settle claims with EQC? The Race Relations Commissioner calls out MP Shane Jones, and business is soaring at a Whanganui flight school. And the $1 pizza, bargain or burden?
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. 2 people who've been showing symptoms of the coronavirus have both tested negative. Both had the travel history and symptoms consistent with COVID-19, but both have been cleared of the disease. There is still just one confirmed case in New Zealand, a woman in her 60s who flew back from Iran a week ago. She remains in a slowly improving condition in Auckland City Hospital. The chief executive of a retirement village says rest homes could be in dire straits if the coronavirus hits, and they don't get enough backup from district health boards. The Aged Care Association and the Retirement Village Association have both said the government and DHBs are not doing enough to support the aged care sector in the face of the COVID-19 threat. Hilary Sumpter of the Kerikeri Retirement Village says having enough staff is one of the biggest worries.
A lot of our people, they're at hospital level care, which means they need 2 people to assist them in their daily living at all times. So we would have people in very dire circumstances if we didn't have staff.
Hilary Sumpter says they need more protective equipment like masks from DHBs to help staff stay well. The principal of an Auckland school has quarantined herself for 2 weeks after returning from Italy. Claire Amos of Albany Senior High School says she flew to northern Italy to attend a conference before it was announced that Italy had been hit by the coronavirus. The country's death toll now stands at 52. Ms Amos says she could not put her school at risk.
It's a neat opportunity to remind our students, our staff and community the importance to actually have a really calm and considered response to this. I don't think anything's gained from, panic and overreaction, but I do think it's really important that we keep informed.
Claire Amos of Albany Senior High School. The Race Relations Commissioner says the Prime Minister needs to show leadership and call Shane Jones out for making racist comments. The New Zealand First Cabinet Minister said on Sunday that Indian students have ruined academic institutions and there are too many immigrants from New Delhi. Jacinda Ardern says his words were loose and wrong, but has not said they were racist. Meng Foon says they were racist and Ms Ardern needs to say so.
I would like the Prime Minister to come out stronger and show leadership in this area. If we don't show leadership and high integrity in office, what is the message we are sending out to the rest of New Zealanders?
The Race Relations Commissioner, Meng Foon. A controversial mongrel mob member who was a senior official of the Royal Commission on Historic Abuse and Care has quietly left the inquiry. Harry Tam was stood down last June after allegations by female state abuse survivors. Katie Scotcher reports.
An independent inquiry was ordered into the allegations, but its scope and subsequent findings have never been made public. The Commission has now confirmed Mr Tam no longer works for it, but it won't say when he officially left the inquiry, if he resigned or was asked to leave, and if he received a payout. Mr Tam declined to comment when contacted by RNZ. Ko Katie Scotcher aho.
The police are replacing their complaint system, Speak Up, with a new external helpline following a review of how they deal with bullying complaints. Replacing Speak Up with something external and independent was one of the 30 recommendations made by Debbie Francis, whose review was done after RNZ reported a widespread culture of bullying in the police. The Police Commissioner Mike Bush says he agrees with everything in the 29-page report and replacing Speak Up is a priority.
We want somewhere where people can not only report things, but at the same time get some help, some support, some guidance for what they might be going through.
Mike Bush says all recommendations should be implemented within 18 months. It's 4 minutes past 5. Black Caps assistant coach Shane Jurgensen says they were better prepared tactically for the series against India than they were for the horror 3-0 series loss in Australia earlier in the summer. New Zealand completed a 7-wicket win over the world's #1 side in Christchurch yesterday, following a 10-wicket win in Wellington. Jurgensen says playing in familiar conditions wasn't the only factor in their success.
I also feel that as a group we've just made some slight adjustments with our preparation, but at the same time I'm really impressed at how the group's gelled off the field to really make sure that we get our preparation and not quite specific tactically.
Black Caps assistant coach Shane Jurgensen. Former All Black Sir John Kirwan is urging Kalen Ponga not to sign a new contract with Newcastle League club if he wants to play for New Zealand at the 2023 Rugby World Cup. The NRL star has reportedly been offered a 4-year, $4.5 million contract upgrade with the option of leaving in 2023 to play for the All Blacks. Kirwan says the Knights full black will require at least 2 years in union and would be taking a huge risk by switching codes just a year out from the tournament in France. Arsenal have won through to the quarter-finals of English football's FA Cup by beating Portsmouth 2-0. Chelsea host Liverpool tomorrow and Manchester City are away to Sheffield Wednesday and Thursday. That's the news.
The markets throw a wobbly.
With more and more cities and people are quarantined, it just naturally slows down activity. And as we're sort of hearing, the outlook for the global economy is not looking particularly good at this point.
Farmers tell politicians to back off.
When I'm getting it wrong by law, come and tell me. At this stage, I'm doing more than I'm meant to, not less. Just leave me alone, Wellington. I'm sick of you.
And cricketing success against India.
Just had the number one side here in New Zealand, and we're able to beat them in 4 and 3 days.
No skiting, just facts. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, a few showers, possibly heavy and thundery in Northland. Waikato to Taumaranui, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Fine spells, the odd shower today, showers tomorrow, some heavy and possibly thundery. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine today, showers and isolated thunderstorms tomorrow. Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington, also wided upper. Cloudy areas and the odd shower tonight, rain tomorrow morning and then fine spells. Nelson and Buller, rain this evening, mainly fine with isolated showers tomorrow. Westland, rain with heavy falls, easing tonight, fine tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, scattered rain spreading north today, partly cloudy tomorrow with a few showers, especially inland. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, a few showers, clearing central and northern Otago tonight. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, rain for a time tomorrow, briefly heavy. RNZ National. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. And this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. 31 people in New Zealand are currently awaiting test results for the COVID-19 coronavirus. But tests on the 2 people who were feared to be carrying the virus today came back negative. The Ministry of Health's Healthline yesterday had more calls than it has ever had, with over 1,600 people phoning, mainly about the coronavirus. Now, that's around 80% more than the same day last year. There have been 155 tests for the virus so far, with only 1 returning a positive result for COVID-19. That person remains in Auckland Hospital, where their condition continues to improve. At a press briefing today, Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, said authorities still believe the chances of an outbreak in the wider community in New Zealand is low.
We're continuing, though, to expect sporadic cases, but we have public health measures and border measures in place that will improve our chances, not just of preventing cases coming in, but of identifying cases early and putting in appropriate measures to contain and prevent further spread.
New Zealand health officials are continuing to liaise with their counterparts in Australia and elsewhere in the world, with the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor, Juliette Gerard, taking part in a teleconference organised by the White House with global health leaders. At the border, the government continues to ramp up restrictions on people travelling from the worst-hit countries.
We are also now expecting people coming in from South Korea and from northern Italy, the 3 provinces in the north of Italy, to self-isolate for 14 days to help reduce the risk that anyone who might be infected but asymptomatic from those regions coming into New Zealand could spread it. And those are the 2 regions where at the moment, in addition to Iran, there is the highest level of ongoing community transmission. We're particularly concerned about Iran, and you know that has been added to the small list that included China only previously, where we are not allowing people to come into New Zealand unless they are Kiwis.
Ashley Bloomfield says the fact they've managed to keep coronavirus out of the country for so long gives New Zealand a real advantage in containing its spread, because it's allowed health workers to watch the way the virus behaves and the impact of various control measures. Globally, more than 3,000 people have died from the coronavirus and about 88,000 have been infected. Suicidal workers, unpaid mortgages and families at breaking point is the situation right now in Tairawhiti. But the Economic Development Minister says jobs to replace those affected by the coronavirus are months away. Phil Twyford has been visiting the East Coast today to speak to forestry workers and other industries affected by the economic slowdown caused by COVID-19. The Forestry Industry Contractors Association says up to 2,500 forestry workers could be out of jobs, with several hundred of them in the Gisborne East Coast area. Mr Twyford says the government's working on ideas to bring forward government projects to create new jobs because they understand people are struggling.
The community here is, and the forestry industry particularly, are doing it tough. We spoke to forestry contractors, for instance, who have had to lay off in the last week, 2 of 4 gangs, for instance. Wayne McEwen in Tolaga Bay, who I met today, very emotional story. He's laid off people who've been with him for years. He's desperate to try to keep his business afloat and said that he's not going to die wondering whether that's possible or not. But look, the disruption to the Chinese market has had a pretty savage effect on the forestry industry here. 1 in 4 families in the Tairawhiti are connected to the forestry supply chain. And so we've got to do everything we can to help the community and the industry get through this.
So what are you going to do for those workers then and their families?
So for a start, there are some things that the government can and is doing that will make a big difference. Yesterday, Cabinet announced $4 million so we can scale up business advisory services that we're already running to directly work with businesses to help them navigate through this, and that's important. MSD already doing great work, the labour market rapid response teams linking up employers and job seekers to try and get people into the available jobs. But today we've been particularly...
So what are those jobs, Minister? Sorry? The jobs... what jobs are they being pointed in the direction of, and how many are available? Can you give us some kind of idea of scale here?
I can't put numbers on that, Lisa, but there are, just in a business as usual sense, there are jobs and opportunities that come up in different sectors, horticulture and others. But that's not going to be enough, given the scale of the impact here. And that's why we've been talking about what are the practical things that we can do to keep people in work and keep businesses afloat. So one example is we're investing a lot of money through the Provincial Growth Fund in upgrading the Tairawhiti's local roads and state highway network. Can we bring forward some of those projects, speed up the consenting, and shift some of the construction workers who are currently working in forestry?
But how realistic is that, Minister? How realistic? Because you're talking about roading, right? You talked about speeding up consents. We all know that there's a lot of bureaucracy around consents. So realistically, could you do this in a week or 2 weeks? Could you get people into roading jobs, and how many? Because that's what people want to know, the detail.
Yeah, so we can't give the detail now, Lisa. We're just talking about the idea now, and I'm going to go back to Wellington right now and get the officials cracking on this, get them working with the leadership here in the Tairawhiti, iwi, council and industry to see if we can do this. It's not just roading, there are other possibilities. There's horticulture. We're talking to DOC about whether there's DOC projects that can be brought forward. One of the really promising ideas that came up today was whether or not we can work with the forest owners to help them bring forward construction work and road building in the forestry plantations. This is work that they would do sometime in the coming months or over the next year. They don't currently have the cash flow to support it. Could we bring that work forward? That could mean that a lot of the forestry contractors would stay in business. So we're going to explore that as well.
So when do you expect your experts to come back with the plan of attack and potential timeframes?
Look, I would hope in the coming days, in the next week or two, we will thrash out an action plan that will include a number of the ideas that we've been discussing today. And
so days, a week or 2 weeks?
I would say between a week and 2 weeks, we will have the bones of an action plan. The community here is highly organised. They've been working together now, and I want central government to do justice to their efforts and really come to the table and support them to, do something to do it in a different way, Lisa. Typically, when you get these cycles in an industry like forestry, we've got the benefit system to help people when they're without jobs. And in general, governments have allowed market forces to play out and just wait for the cycle to turn. And I think we owe the community more than that. And if we want to build a more capable and productive industry, we've got to work with the industry to get through this downturn without losing the skills and the good firms and the good people.
And I'm sure that people would agree with that sentiment, but what a lot of people are looking for is a solid plan with some firm details. Because we've been talking to forestry workers today who say that people are dipping into their Kiwi savers using the hardship criteria to access those funds. Should they have to do that?
No, they shouldn't, Lisa. And there is urgency here. I spoke to people today who talked about workmates who are suicidal about this. Families being broken up, a huge stress on people who find themselves with a mortgage they can't pay, with debt to finance companies for vehicles and for the gear that they use for their jobs, that they can no longer service those payments. And that takes a terrible toll. I spoke to the principal of the area school.
So where is the financial assistance for them, the solid financial assistance? Because we look at the number of MSD, hardship grants that have been handed out specific to the effects of coronavirus, and we're looking at 32 with a total of $4,837. Now that's about $150 per person. So where is the additional financial assistance? Where is that going to come from in the immediate term?
The welfare system will pick up a lot of the slack immediately. We've put money into, as we have in the tourism industry, we've put money as well into direct support.
But it's not though, is it, Minister? If they're dipping into their Kiwi savers, it's not. Or your messaging is wrong around that. Could that be your problem?
Well, I think what we do want to say to people is that anybody who is on reduced hours, who can't cope financially, who's lost their job, needs to go into work and income, and we will do our darndest to make sure people get all of the possible help they're entitled to.
Minister, you've said you think you've got some good ideas. So how long before those ideas translate into actual jobs? So 1 to 2 weeks for a plan, and then how long before the jobs come out the other end of the pipeline?
I would say, realistically, Leslie, we're talking kind of several weeks after that. It's not possible to flick a switch and do this stuff overnight, but we're going to give it as much urgency as we can. And I know people on the ground here in Tairāwhiti are up for that. So 2 months, you reckon, before these ideas turn into actual jobs? Thereabouts? I would hope less than that, but bear in mind that we've got some ideas now about practical things we can do, and we're going to go hell for leather to put them into action.
And that's the Economic Development Minister, Phil Twyford. A retirement village boss says rest homes could be in dire circumstances if coronavirus hits and they don't get enough backup from DHBs. The Aged Care Association and the Retirement Villages Association says they're not getting the support they need from the government and district health boards as they formulate a plan for how to deal with an outbreak. People over 80 have up to a 15% fatality rate from the disease, with those over 65 also much more vulnerable than the rest of the population. Health correspondent Rowan Quinn reports.
85-year-old Graham Tate says the COVID-19 virus is very much front of mind in his community at the Diane Isaac Retirement Village in Christchurch.
Because we have to be 70 to come into this particular village, and because many of us, including myself, are in their mid-80s, so we're very aware that we are much more vulnerable than perhaps a younger person should the virus spread.
The chief executive of Keri Keri Retirement Village, Hilary Sumpter, says some residents are panicking about the virus's arrival. She says her organisation's trying to give them some perspective that it's not spreading yet and they have a pandemic plan in place, but she does have some worries.
The scariest thing for retirement villages and care facilities is going to be keeping staff if we get an outbreak, where the DHB can help us reassuring staff or having enough equipment to protect our staff, because otherwise people won't come to work.
Ms Sumpter says one of the most important things that DHBs can provide is protective gear for staff, like masks and gowns and sanitisers. That would help keep people working.
A lot of our people, they're at hospital level care, which means they need 2 people to assist them in their daily living at all times. So we would have people in very dire circumstances if we didn't have staff.
The Chief Executive of the Aged Care Association, Simon Wallace, says he's frustrated at the lack of direction or support from district health boards and the government. He says he's tried unsuccessfully to engage with DHBs and can't get a straight answer about how they'll help out if the virus hits.
Coronavirus would be on a level that we have neither the staff or the infrastructure to deal with.
Mr Wallace says as well as protective equipment, retirement villages and care homes need a plan for what to do if they have too many sick people to care for themselves. Graham Tate says it gives him reassurance to be in a village run by the large organisation Ryman because it has lots of resources and communication is good. But he can see the situation could be worrying for those in smaller homes.
In my time here, several outbreaks of norovirus within the main care centres, and it's just a complete lockdown. The independent livers don't go into the main centres. Those in the main centres are confined to their rooms.
Mr Bloomfield says it's important those over 65 get flu jabs, not to protect them from COVID-19, but to keep them well and keep space in hospitals. For Checkpoint, Rowan Quinn, DNA.
Harry Tam, the controversial mongrel mob member who was a senior official at the Royal Commission into Historic Abuse in Care, has quietly left the inquiry. Tam was stood down as the Royal Commission's head of policy and research in June last year, after RNZ revealed a female state abuse survivor contacted the inquiry with safety fears. Other female survivors had also expressed concerns because of gang involvement in the inquiry's process. An independent inquiry was ordered into the allegations, but its scope and subsequent findings have never been made public. Katie Scotcher reports.
The Royal Commission has confirmed to RNZ Harry Tam no longer works for the inquiry, but the circumstances surrounding the end of his employment remain a mystery. It won't say when he officially left the inquiry, if he resigned, was asked to leave, or if he received a payout. It has also repeatedly refused to release the scope of its inquiry into the allegations made against Tam, and won't confirm if its own response to the allegations was investigated. Abuse survivors have previously told RNZ commissioners had known about the claims made by female abuse survivors for months and had failed to act to provide a safe environment for survivors coming forward. The Royal Commission is refusing to release the probe's findings publicly too. A spokesperson says this is because it's an employment matter. Harry Tam is a high-profile mongrel mob member with a domestic violence conviction. He declined RNZ's requests for comment. Tony Jarvis is a member of the Royal Commission Survivor Advisory Group. He encouraged Harry Tam to apply for the job several years ago and is disappointed to see him go.
We need a voice that is recognised within the mongrel mob that can bring this subject out, which is a most sensitive subject, particularly for survivors, but, and particularly maybe for gang members.
Tony Jarvis says Harry Tam played a pivotal role at the Royal Commission.
Harry just was involved predominantly in mongrel mob. But remember that he liaised and he worked with other factions, other groups, and no doubt other gangs trying to bring about change. So he was a very, very prominent figure in my mind when you looked at representing gangs or outreaching and making that connection to the gangs or whānau.
At its first public hearing, the Royal Commission heard from many survivors who said the abuse they experienced as children in care led them to join gangs later in life. Tony Jarvis says it's important gangs are represented at the inquiry.
We need, regardless of the flank and what public might say about gang members being involved in it, if we want to get to the truth and have an in-depth report, we need to involve them because their inception came out of failed state care.
Tony Jarvis says the Survivor Advisory Group has not been told anything about Harry Tam's departure. The minister responsible for the high-level inquiry, Tracy Martin, was not briefed on the investigation and its outcome. A spokesperson says the commission is independent and the minister isn't involved in or responsible for operational or employment matters. Mo te hōtaka o te akiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
It's 5:25 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Get in touch about anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know if you've got any ideas for bolstering jobs in the Tairāwhiti area, those jobs hard hit by coronavirus. Do you have a family member in aged care? Are you confident that the situation is under control? Or let us know your thoughts on the abuse inquiry. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz, and I bet you'll have something to say on this next story. A bargain or a health burden? A Pizza Hut promotion for $1 pizzas at lunchtime at its Otara store has raised the ire of David Latali from Butterbean Motivation, who says it's targeting the wrong people. Mr. Latali is a fitness trainer and life coach who works with the Pacific Island community, and he joins me now. David, what's the problem with this offer?
Well, it's just... there's a lot wrong with it. It's absolutely disgraceful. We're being targeted. We're being targeted here that the most profitable fast food stores are in the most deprived areas. Now, some people are saying to me, oh, look, they're feeding the hungry. No, that's absolutely wrong. If they're feeding the hungry, what they should do is donate a proportion of their profits to give healthy food to those families that are going there that can't afford healthy food. It's just so wrong, and it's just got me really angry, actually.
So when you say we are being targeted, who do you mean specifically?
Well, Māori PI, brown people. Look, anyone poor. If you look at where the most fast food stores are, okay, in Auckland, West Auckland and South Auckland, they are everywhere, and it's to offer this $1 pizza. And some people have said, that these families are going to go there and be able to eat this food. I'm not blaming the families. Of course, if they haven't got money, they're going to go there and feed. And so the cycle continues. We see every day, we are on the front line of this fight. We see the effects of obesity. They're chopping limbs off because of type 2 diabetes every day in Middlemore Hospital. The system just doesn't know what to do. And this is the problem. There needs to be some kind of... there should be no more fast food joints allowed in South Auckland. We don't need it anymore. The government needs to step up here and put some kind of restriction. I said this years ago. There needs to be a restriction on the fast food outlets in the poor, deprived areas, and they should be putting back money into areas feeding hungry kids with healthy food options.
To be fair, there are overweight people in Ponsonby and Point Chev and other suburbs around the country, and there are KFCs and McDonald's in all those suburbs as well. So,
well, there's no KFC or McDonald's in Mission Bay or Rimaweta. There's none there, and the people in those areas, yes, some of them might be obese, but they also might be drinking too much. I'm not saying it's just a New Zealand problem. So New Zealand is the third most obese nation in the OECD, behind America and Mexico. So it's not just a Māori PI problem. Yet we are a minority in this country, but we're overrepresented in these stats. Just in counties Manukau alone, 73% of our population, Pacific population, are obese. 54% of Māoris are obese. But if you walk around in these poor areas, it's even worse than that. Nationally, 30% of PI kids are obese, with 17% of Māori kids obese. Walk around any poor area, and I guarantee you it's worse than that.
David, some people will say you don't have to buy the pizza. Walk away from it.
Yeah, you don't have to buy it. That's why I'm not saying it's the family's fault. But if you have a family of 5 and you have $20 to feed $20 to your name, of course you're going to go there and buy it. Pizza Hut needs to take responsibility, and even more than that, the government needs to take some responsibility and put some restriction on this. There's so many issues that need fixing, and I'm aware of that. But this does not help. We're on the front line every day. We see the results of unhealthy living. What we do in BBM is we educate families on how to make healthier choices. We get people around positive people that are doing good things, and we exercise. But this does not help.
So you would have been seeing the responses on your Facebook page in response to your comments. Somebody there saying that if she only has limited money, she's working 15 hours a day, the more I work, the more I was taxed. The state has failed our nation, yet the rich get richer. If I had to buy a $1 pizza for my children to eat, knowing it's unhealthy, at least they are eating, says that person who responded to you. And another one says, see it as a donation to the poor and hungry.
Well, that's total rubbish. That's just, if it was about donating to the poor and hungry, they should donate their profits to feed underprivileged kids with healthy food, like we do at BBM. Now, as far as the what was the other comment on the post, though? The first one you said?
Was that, it's better than going without food.
Yeah, and that's what I said in my other comments. I'm not judging the families. I'm fully aware, and myself, I used to weigh 210 kilos and broke myself with not 1 cent in my pocket, staying at a community home on a mattress on the floor. I'm fully aware of what the struggles that our people go through. What I am saying is that this does not help us. What the government should do is put a restriction on fast food outlets coming into the poor areas and subsidise the education around healthy eating and also subsidise healthier food. What we do in BBM is we educate people on how to make healthier choices. And we do that without any government funding.
We're almost out of time, David. What would you suggest they spend the buck on, if not the pizza, food-wise?
Well, no, you're missing the point here. I don't blame the families for going in there. If you have no money and you're hungry, of course, the point here is that the government should be stepping in and not allowing fast food joints to do this. We are being exploited. They're not helping the poor, they're exploiting the poor. There's a difference.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That's David Latali, who is a fitness and life coach, and he's not happy about the fact that Pizza Hut is running a promotion, $1 pizzas at lunchtime at its Otara store. Now, we did try and get comment from restaurant brands this afternoon, but we're still waiting for a response. And coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis meets with the new Air New Zealand CEO Greg Foran to discuss the impact of coronavirus, why 1,600 Canterbury homeowners still have outstanding claims with EQC 9 years on, and a Whanganui flight school buys a motel to accommodate overseas students. Get in touch about anything you've heard on the program this evening. I'm really interested in your views on the $1 pizzas. Are people being exploited or is it cheap food if you've got no other option? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And also that suggestion that the government should cap fast food stores in certain areas. Would love to hear from you. It's just past 5:30, so let's get to the 5:30-ish headlines with Susanna.
2 people in New Zealand who've been showing potential symptoms of coronavirus have tested negative. Over 150 tests have so far been completed with just 1 positive result. Meanwhile, authorities in Australia are considering extreme prevention measures, including forcibly detaining patients to reduce the spread of the virus. The Economic Development Minister has today been speaking to forestry workers and other industries affected by the economic slowdown caused by COVID-19. Phil Twyford told Checkpoint the government is looking at bringing forward some projects to create new jobs for those who are out of work. He says the government will do all it can to help those left unable to cope financially due to consequences of coronavirus. The police are replacing their complaint system with a new external helpline following a review of how they deal with bullying complaints. Replacing Speak Up with something external and independent was one of 30 recommendations made by Debbie Francis, whose review took place after RNZ reported a widespread culture of bullying in the police force. The former US Vice President Joe Biden has received a slew of endorsements ahead of the crucial Super Tuesday primary votes. His former Democratic rivals Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar are among those to put their weight behind Mr Biden for president. Bus driver strikes planned for tomorrow in Auckland have been postponed. First Union's Jared Abbott says they will negotiate with NZ Bus on Friday and he hopes a deal can be reached. 35 services were cancelled this morning because of industrial action. Families say unfair health restrictions are keeping whānau apart. Rupinder Kaur and her husband Pritinder Singh cannot find a nanny and are leaving their 1-month-old daughter with Mr Singh's mother in India, whose health means that she cannot even visit New Zealand. Mr Singh says they provided medication receipts to prove his mother would not use the New Zealand health system. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just tuning in, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. It's time now for business with Giles Beckford. Kia ora, Giles. Australia's central bank has, it's taken some steps against the threat of coronavirus. What's happening?
Well, it's the first cab off the rank, and of course much of the talk in the past week or so has been for the likelihood, the need for central banks and governments to step up to the mark when it comes to tackling the impact of coronavirus. So the Reserve Bank of Australia, as expected, cut its cash rate to 0.5%. That's a quarter of a percentage point cut. 0.5% is their cash rate now. The commentary is just dominated by all the usual phrases that you would expect. It says growth in Australia will be noticeably weaker than expected because of the virus. It talks about the impact on jobs, growth, exports, tourism, the works. The bottom line in the end is that it says it's better to cut now and if needs be, perhaps cut again. So this is a stitch in time, they hope in time, to try and save 9 to just shore up the Australian economy. We have a teleconference of the finance ministers of the 7 richest countries, the G7. That'll be in the next 24 hours. Expect more global action on that one. And this RBA statement, I'd have to say, is probably a template for what we'll see from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand in a couple of weeks' time when it has its next interest rate decision. Although they were reluctant 3 weeks ago to be talking about cutting the cash rate, I think the tide of circumstances and events and changes and pressures on Adrian Orr now is irresistible, and we can at the very least expect a quarter of a percentage point cut to the cash rate, which would take us down to 0.75%.
Okay, so you're telling us that one of the titans of American corporate sector is dead. Is that oxymoronic if you're a titan and you're now dead? What's going on? Well,
look, let's not get into classical references too much about this one and the wondering of it. I wouldn't normally do an obituary. People die all the time, notable and unnotable. But this is a guy called Jack Welch, who was the head of General Electric. And he built that company up over a 20-year period from the late 80s through to the early part of the 2000s into a $400 billion company from $12 billion. Just to give you some scale, that's twice the value of the New Zealand economy. Now, to say that he was a hard man is probably a little bit of an understatement. He is, depending on your point of view, a champion of corporate growth, free enterprises, wealth creation, globalism, or on the other side, he was a rapacious global businessman who let nothing and nobody stand in his way. He had a reputation when he acquired businesses of going in hard, restructuring them. He sacked tens of thousands of workers, and that earned him the nickname of Neutron Jack, because the buildings were still standing, but the people didn't survive when he arrived. He also was particularly tough on managers. He sort of devised a 3-tier scale on measuring them. He didn't have too much respect for them. One of his notable phrases was saying, the last thing you want is to have a kick-ass manager in your... a kiss-ass manager in your organisation, because they just are parasites. They sort of rise off the work of other people. They take credit for it. They add nothing of value to your company. So from that point of view, there's probably some people there that we might recognise and identify with from that point of view. But as you say, one of those names of the past, one of those big names has gone. Quite whether we'll see his like again, I suspect not.
So Giles, tell us, at the end of the day, where do we finish up on the markets as well?
Well, for the past week, I've just been saying, it's a Sierra red, it's a Sierra red, it's a Sierra red. Today it was green of profits, green of rising markets, following on from Wall Street's 5% gain. And everybody now is pinning hopes that central banks will come to the party. So that's buoyed investors to get back in, buy the cheap stocks as they see them. So our share market was up to about 2.2%, 240 odd points. We were up more than 3% at one stage, but we gave back some of those gains. And for the New Zealand dollar, 62.6 US cents, 95.6 Australia, and if you feel like you need to go to Britain, 49 British pence.
Thanks, Giles. That's Giles Beckford, our business editor, with the numbers today. A new tourism advisory group will meet for the first time this week. The COVID-19 Tourism Action Group, or CTAG, has been set up to advise the government on the fallout of coronavirus and strategies for boosting visitor numbers. The group includes representatives from Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch international airports and Air New Zealand. The airline has already warned its profits this year could be down as much as $75 million in the wake of the outbreak. New CEO Greg Foran was among representatives who met with Tourism Minister Calvin Davis in his office today. A short time ago, I asked Mr Davis about CTAG and what it hopes to achieve.
There's a number of members of the group, starting with Tourism Industry Aotearoa, there's the Regional Tourism New Zealand, the Tourism Export Council in New Zealand, and there's also representatives across the aviation sector, along with a number of government agencies such as MB, Tourism New Zealand, MFAT, Education, Health and Immigration. The primary purpose of the CTAG is really to act as a single source of industry advice to the government on the changing impacts of COVID-19 on the tourism industry. It's to lead our re-engagement strategy with key international markets. We've got to make sure that we do have coordination across NZ Inc. and also to connect with the wider government re-engagement plan and just provide clear and consistent messaging to the tourism industry on public health management and economic impact mitigation measures.
Is it going to be a talk fest?
No, this is a very important group. Like I said, we've got to make sure that we act as a single source of industry advice to the government. We've got to make sure that our messaging is clear and that we prepare for when we start to emerge from this situation.
What I'm wanting to know is whether you have an accurate idea of the severity of the situation within the tourism industry. For example, how many jobs are lost, how many people are on cut hours, how much money they say that they're missing out on as a consequence of this.
Well, at this stage, we don't have the exact numbers. What we do know is that businesses are looking to improve the ability for people to get leave. But it's just too soon to really understand the full impact on tourism.
So Air New Zealand, obviously, government being a shareholder there, what are they telling you? We know they've downgraded their financial outlook significantly for the year. How worried are they? What are they saying to you?
Yeah, look, I met with them today, and they're having to make decisions regarding their routes and how they run their business. But they have said that we'll get through this, but they're making decisions for their business, and other businesses will have to make decisions for themselves too.
Have they told you whether they're standing workers down or asking workers to take leave? Have they mentioned any of that to you?
Yeah, I asked them that specifically. They said that they're looking at making working on the leave situation for people.
Sorry, what do they mean by that?
Well, just making it easier for people to take leave now. They're working on with their workforce to make sure that their people have basically the best outcomes that they can given the circumstances.
So, Minister, did they indicate to you that they're asking workers to take leave where possible?
Oh, no, what they're doing is working with their workers, and if those people who want to take leave can take leave, that's fine. But, like I say, businesses have to make their own decisions for their business, and it's good to see that businesses are working with their employees to get the best outcomes for them.
Could this coronavirus situation push our national carrier to the wall?
No, as they said to me today, that they're confident they'll get through this, and but this is why we're all working together as an industry, as the government, as government agencies, to make sure that we do emerge from this in the best possible situation, which is why we have put in the $11 million. I mean, Tourism New Zealand is the best in the world at marketing New Zealand. We're looking at those alternative markets. Every dollar they spend, we get a return of $18 back. So, you know, we're confident that we're doing the right things now to assist the tourism sector, the tourism industry, to get through this global situation.
Calvin Davis, Tourism Minister there. 1,600, that is the number of Canterbury homeowners with earthquake claims still open with EQC. About 100 homeowners turned up to a meeting organised by EQC Fix in Christchurch last night, all with stories of home repair hell, botched repairs or seemingly never-ending arguments with EQC, Southern Response or their private insurer. They were all tired and wondering why they still had to fight more than 9 years on from the first Canterbury earthquake. Our video journalist Logan Church travelled to Christchurch to speak to those still fighting for what they believe they're entitled to.
Vicky Ann Parker is known as a local hero in Christchurch. Her charity, New Zealand Gifts for Love and Strength, wrangled hundreds of volunteers in the wake of the mosque attacks to support victims. But at her home, which she shares with her small dog Chloe, all is not well. Vicky bought the small house in 2012 for $311,000, knowing there were some earthquake repairs to be done. The driveway was cracked and the walls needed to be patched up. She says EQC sent contractors out early on to do that work, which was done for about $21,000 plus $7,000 for the driveway and paths. But in the months and years since, Vicky started noticing things go wrong.
Definitely, there's more cracking appearing. Obviously, the door handles haven't been fixed. The wardrobes keep popping. The drive is cracking again. So it's ongoing. I suspect that my ring foundations are possibly a wee bit cracked as well.
Paint on ceiling corners is starting to crack. Nails can be felt popping out in the bathroom. Door locks that were there before the repairs have just been painted over. Wallpaper is also bunching in the corner of the walls, a worrying sign that the wall could be moving. Outside, the large cracks in the driveway that were filled seem to be getting larger, and the filling itself is breaking apart.
So I have finally decided, because I saw that EQC were looking at closing off, that you could apply for a review of your repairs, and I thought, no, time has come for me to have another say.
Vicky went back to EQC last week. She tells me she knows her house isn't the worst in Christchurch, but she is worried these problems might one day turn into a bigger problem. And that is something she is not in a position to deal with.
And I also fight on a daily basis with Lyme disease and co-infections like Bartonella and Babesia. So, yeah, it is a struggle, but putting things in perspective, if I don't get things fixed and reassessed at the moment, they'll never get assessed. And should I decide to sell one day, the next person's going to end up with the issues that I've currently got, and that's not right in my eyes.
Vicky's claim has now been reopened at EQC. She is just one of hundreds of people who still have open claims. At last count, more than 9 years on, there were 1,600 left from the Canterbury earthquake sequence. And many of those homeowners came to a public meeting last night at the Transitional Cathedral in central Christchurch to hear from lawyers Peter Woods and Grant Cameron, insurance advocate Dean Lester, quantity surveyor Stu Harrison, and outgoing EQC Deputy Chief Executive Renee Walker. It's the 7th such meeting organised by EQC Fix since the quakes. Attending were about 100 homeowners, all of them tired, all of them stressed, all of them wondering why they had to be here 9 years on.
When you talk about empathy, you know, EQC classed me as vulnerable. Why should I still be here? And you trying to talk in generalities to me, you know, it just doesn't make sense.
I agree, so that's why I would like to try and help. And I can't speak to what's happened before because I'm not sure of the specifics, but I would like to try and help, so well, let's have a conversation.
It's not what's happened before, it's what's happening now.
But Renee Walker began with giving the crowd an update as to just how many people are still with EQC.
So we're now down to under 1,600 claims, which for those 1,600 people is still a lot. So I'm not saying that that's a good or a bad figure. There's still 1,600 people with unresolved claims, so that's not great. But we have resolved more than 2,500 over the last 4 months.
Much was also talked about the unsold ex gratia payment announced by the government in August last year. The aim of that was to help homeowners who bought a house only to find later on undiscovered or botched earthquake repairs. And repairs would cost more than the $115,000 cap EQC would pay out. So far, 625 expressions of interest have been received by EQC for this, with 561 of those qualifying. The cut-off for expressions of interest is August this year. But many here expressed concern about the seeming lack of accountability for why homeowners ended up as either an unsold or seemingly stuck in insurance limbo. High-profile Christchurch lawyer Peter Woods is among them.
Here we are more than 9 years on. That system of delay, deny, defend was used, in my view, by most insurers, and most of them have cheated people out of their rightful entitlements. I think the only way you can continue to try and get some accountability is to stand your ground, call out an insurer when they fail to fulfil their obligations or when they've acted in bad faith or when it's engaged in misleading and deceptive conduct. Otherwise, there will never be any accountability.
In the audience was Frances Smekle. She has been arguing with Southern Response about how to re-repair her 3.5-bedroom family home in Bowenvale Valley. Its foundation was badly damaged in the quakes, as well as the drainage, the roofs and the driveway.
I guess it went through the first repair and we thought it was all done and dusted, and we trusted EQC, we trusted the builders that did the work, we trusted Fletcher's who was managing it. But yeah, then once we got a bit down the track, things weren't fixed and it became quite obvious that there was all sorts of issues. Probably one of the biggest struggles for me is the fact that the only thing we really want to do is make sure the house is repaired properly, not just for us but for anybody that has it in future. And at the moment, that's probably the thing that's the hardest to do. And in some ways, that's what makes this quite tough, is because you feel like by trying to do the right thing, you're actually picking the most difficult path.
It seems like the logical thing to do, fix the house properly.
Yeah, you would hope so, but it's just not quite set up that way to really facilitate that.
And homeowners like Frances can't walk away from their claims. But EQC's Deputy Chief Executive Renee Walker is calling it quits. So given the large number of people who still have earthquake insurance claims with EQC, I asked Ms Walker why.
I've just decided that it's time for me to do something different. I've worked in the earthquake recovery space for 9 years, and as you can see tonight, it's not always easy. I think I'm really proud of what I've personally achieved, but also what we've achieved at EQC over the last 12 months. We've got the unsold policy up and implemented. We've got Southern Response transitioned in. The culture, I think, feels very different, and I'm really proud of that. But I think it is time for me to do something different and for other people to be able to carry that forward.
Renee Walker hopes those 1,600 claims currently with EQC will number below 1,000 by the time she leaves in May. But as the room empties and everyone goes home, these homeowners hope this might be the last public meeting they will have to attend, and the end might at long last be in sight. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
It is 7 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The momentum is gathering around former US Vice President Joe Biden in his bid for the White House. Mr. Biden's campaign was fading after voting in the early states, but experienced a much-needed resurgence with a big win in South Carolina. Now he's being helped further by two rival moderates pulling out of the race. Senator Amy Klobuchar withdrew today and Pete Buttigieg yesterday. Both have appeared with him in Dallas, Texas this afternoon to endorse him.
You know, when I ran for president, we made it clear that the whole idea was about rallying the country together to defeat Donald Trump and to win the era for the values that we share. And that was always a goal that was much bigger than me becoming president. And it is in the name of that very same goal that I'm delighted to endorse and support Joe Biden for president.
Today,
I am ending my campaign and endorsing Joe Biden for president. Joe Biden has dedicated his life to fighting for people, not for the rich and the powerful, but for the mom, for the farmer, for the dreamer, for the builder, for the veteran. He can bring our country together.
It's all happened at an opportune time for Joe Biden, a day before Super Tuesday, when 14 states and 1 territory will vote.
So, folks, we got a shot. This is bigger than whether a Democrat wins. This is about restoring the character of America. Not a joke. Because we've been damaged all over the world. We've been damaged badly. His embrace of thugs and dictators, his way he treats our military and talks about them, the way he demeans people. Ladies and gentlemen at home, he's never done anything other than seek division. So folks, it's time to get back up. We're decent, we're brave, we're resilient people, and we can believe again. We are better than this moment, we are better than this president, and so get up. Let's take back this country. We're the United States of America, and there's not a single thing we cannot do if we do it together.
Former senior advisor to President Obama, David Axelrod, says it's been a good day for Mr. Biden.
The fact that he had Pete Buttigieg at his side just a few hours ago, endorsing him. Now Amy Klobuchar has got another endorsement coming here. These are all momentum builders. Joe Biden needs to get a head of steam up going into Super Tuesday. He doesn't have advertising to speak of around the country. They're getting in late. He's coming from behind in many places. He's hoping that he can take advantage of some of the voters who are going to vote for these candidates. But it also sends a signal that he is the guy to get behind, that he is a winner here. If you are in that center-left lane, he's the person to consolidate behind. And, this is important because his next big mission, among these consolidations, is to get the guy with $60 billion to consolidate behind.
Yes. David Axelrod there referring to candidate Michael Bloomberg. Back home now, and the Race Relations Commissioner is calling on the Prime Minister to show some leadership and call out Shane Jones for what's being described as racist comments. The Cabinet Minister and New Zealand First MP said Indian students have ruined academic institutions and there were too many immigrants from New Delhi. Commissioner Meng Foon says the comments are ignorant and irresponsible. Political reporter Yvette McCullough has more.
Meng Foon isn't mincing words.
This continued rhetoric of picking on minorities is hurtful, shameful, demeaning, and I'm asking Mr. Jones to be kind and to stop this sort of nonsense.
He says this language has no place in New Zealand, particularly in the wake of the mosque attacks. Mr. Foon says Jacinda Ardern needs to call out Mr. Jones' comments for what they are: racist.
I would like the Prime Minister to come out stronger and show leadership in this area. If we don't show leadership and high integrity in office, what is the message we are sending out to the rest of New Zealanders?
Ms Ardern says she spoke to Mr Jones this morning and made it clear his language was loose and wrong, but she wouldn't go so far as to call it racist.
It's wrong. Patently, it's wrong. Whatever label you put on it, it was wrong. I've said that. I've shared that publicly. I've shared it privately. And I've also shared my view on those comments going forward.
However, Mr Jones doubled down on his comments to RNZ, saying he wants to highlight both the fraud in the education system and the exploitation of students. And his leader, Winston Peters, is backing him.
Mr Jones was mirroring the comments that Indian people have passed on to us. So they couldn't be racist in that context, can they? No, I'm talking about over a long period of time, how the Indian people were concerned about what was going on in export education.
National leader Simon Bridges says Mr Jones' comments were racist and Ms Ardern's so-called stern word obviously didn't sink in.
Clearly not, because Shane Jones has doubled down on this, and that's entirely regrettable. We have hundreds of thousands of Indian New Zealanders who hear these comments and they ask themselves whether they're welcome in this country. Well, they are. His comments are racist and wrong.
Ms Ardern says while she has made her views clear to Mr Jones, her powers are limited in an MMP government.
The public will also probably be very mindful that we're in an election year, and more often we're going to see these differing opinions emerge.
But Mr Foon says politicians need to do better and must stop hitting out at minorities in order to get votes.
Just because it's election year, there's not a time for abuse.
Greens co-leader James Shaw agrees. He says Mr Jones' comments are racist, cynical, and he doesn't want to give them any oxygen.
I think in an election year it's incumbent upon politicians right across the political spectrum not to use immigrants, particularly those vulnerable to exploitation, as political footballs.
Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway was dancing around the issue ahead of question time. He said Mr Jones' comments were indefensible, unhelpful and didn't represent government policy, but wouldn't say if he thought they were racist.
I would say that if you're in the Indian community, you probably would feel that they were racist.
However, an hour later, he took a stronger line.
I do think they're racist, yeah.
Mang Foon says politicians need to set an example and put an end to rhetoric that divides the country and emboldens those who hold racist and xenophobic views. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
A big slice of the feedback coming in this evening is on that $1 pizza deal. We'll get to that after 6.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei Atawa tēnei. The Economic Development Minister says the disruption to the Chinese market caused by the COVID-19 outbreak has had a savage impact on the forestry industry. Phil Twyford, who visited the East Coast today to speak with forestry workers and others, told Checkpoint it's creating a lot of stress for families.
I spoke to people today who talked about workmates who are suicidal about this. Families being broken up, a huge stress on people who find themselves with a mortgage they can't pay, with debt to finance companies for vehicles and for the gear that they use for their jobs.
Phil Twyford says the government is looking at bringing forward some projects to create new jobs for those put out of work. The Health Minister is defending the amount of testing being done for COVID-19. The opposition is criticising the government's claim of a textbook response to the outbreak, saying there are still questions about screening and the availability of tests. David Clark says decisions about who gets tested are based on clinical assessments.
And I am very confident that there's no case here about rationing. There's the capacity to test around 200 people in Wellington alone per day if needed. We're nowhere near that. These are clinical assessments best made by doctors and nurses and health professionals.
David Clark. 2 people who've been showing coronavirus-like symptoms have both tested negative today. A controversial mongrel mob member who was a senior official of the Royal Commission on Historic Abuse and Care has quietly left the inquiry. Harry Tam was stood down by the Commission last June after allegations by female state abuse survivors. An independent inquiry was ordered into the allegations, but its findings have never been made public. The Commission has now confirmed Mr Tam no longer works for it, but won't say when he officially left, if he resigned or was asked to leave, and if he received a payout. Mr Tam has declined to comment. The Justice Minister Andrew Little says he's quietly confident abortion reform legislation will pass its second reading tonight, though by a smaller margin. The first reading in August passed by 94 votes to 23. The bill treats abortion as a health issue. After 20 weeks, women would require not 1 but 2 clinicians to sign off on the procedure, a change that was made during the Select Committee process. Mr Little says he's happy with where the bill has landed.
I'm sure there will be fewer votes for the second reading than there were for the first reading. That's pretty standard on issues like this, but I'm not counting my chickens before they hatch. Let's just see what happens.
The Justice Minister Andrew Little. The former US Vice President Joe Biden has received a slew of endorsements on the eve of the biggest day in the Democratic presidential primary race. 14 states will vote on Super Tuesday, with about a third of the total number of delegates up for grabs. With endorsements from former candidates Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and Beto O'Rourke under his belt, Mr Biden talked up his chances in Dallas this afternoon.
So, folks, it's time to get back up. We're decent, we're brave, we're resilient people, and we can believe again. We are better than this moment, we are better than this president, and so get up. Let's take back this country.
The Democratic presidential contender, Joe Biden. The Australian newswire service AAP will close by the end of June with the loss of 180 jobs. Its chief executive Bruce Davidson told staff today the business is no longer viable in the face of increasing free online content. AAP has been supplying news stories to newspapers, broadcasters and digital outlets for 85 years. Its PageMasters editorial production service will also close. As well as staff in Australia, AAP has 30 to 40 journalists and moderators working in New Zealand. It's 4 minutes past 6. The New Zealand squash player Paul Cole has finally had his first win over the world's top-ranked player. Ranked 5th in the world, Cole has beaten Egypt's Mohamed El Shorbagy in straight games in the quarterfinal of the PSA tournament in Chicago. His first win over El Shorbagy is in 6 attempts, puts him into a semi-final against another Egyptian, world number 4, Karim Abdel-Gawad. White Ferns captain Sophie Devine believes New Zealand competes well at the international level, but more has to be done for the women's game here. The New Zealanders have missed out on the T20 World Cup semi-finals for the second straight time. Devine says while they're growing depth, they're going to need more to help compete against the bigger nations.
We're really close to sides that have a lot more money, have a lot more resources, have a lot more player depth than we do. But we're going to have to do things slightly different in New Zealand because we don't have the same amount of people, we don't have the same amount of resources, but we certainly do have things in our favour, and that's what we've got to keep working at.
Sophie Devine. NBA basketball players have been advised to fist bump with fans instead of high-fiving them and avoid handling items to autograph. The advice comes in a memo listing short-term recommendations for limiting the spread of the coronavirus. And England's cricketers won't be shaking hands on the tour to Sri Lanka. Captain Joe Root says they'll greet each other with fist bumps. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, our window on the world explains what agriculture has to do with the space race. Maybe they get higher yields up there. Trevor Reiki talks with Albert Mazaboko from the South African choral sensation Ladysmith Black Mambazo. And our mathematician Dylan Mayhew crunches the numbers on climate change, specifically the numbers some folk claim prove it's a hoax. They're wrong, of course. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, a few showers, possibly heavy and thundery in Northland. Waikato to Taumaranui, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Fine spells, the odd shower today, showers tomorrow, some heavy and possibly thundery. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine today, showers and isolated thunderstorms tomorrow. Taranaki and Taihape to Wellington and Wairarapa, cloudy areas and the odd shower today, rain tomorrow morning, then fine spells. Nelson and Bulla, rain tonight, mainly fine with isolated showers tomorrow. Westland, rain with heavy falls, easing tonight, fine weather tomorrow. For Marlborough and Canterbury, scattered rain spreading north tonight, partly cloudy tomorrow with a few showers, especially inland. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, a few showers, clearing central and North Otago tonight. Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy, rain for a time tomorrow, briefly heavy. RNZ National, it's almost 7 minutes past 6.
I feel we should fist bump,
Lisa,
at the end of that.
There we go.
Right.
To say that.
Now, let's move on to more serious matters. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. As forestry work on the East Coast dries up because of the coronavirus outbreak, people are dipping into their KiwiSaver stores to try and get by. That's despite the government promising to help with financial assistance for those hard hit. The Economic Development Minister, Phil Twyford, has been in Tairawhiti today and says he's spoken to people who are struggling to pay their debt and are suicidal. But he says welfare support is available and people shouldn't need to raid their KiwiSaver. Nita Blake-Person filed this report.
John Ellery is a forestry worker in Gisborne and works right up the coast, or at least he did until last week.
Yeah, that's us done for forestry work. We're just doing odds and ends to try and keep enough wages in for the week.
How many people are in the same position as you?
Well, our business alone has 30, so I think we've all taken a little bit of a cutback, and I know of other businesses that are only doing 2 to 3 days a week, some write-off, so I'd say it'll be affecting thousands of people.
His hours have been cut back from 12 to about 8 a day, and he's not sure how long it will last.
I don't know. I don't think there's enough jobs for everyone to go around, but myself, I'll just have to sort of think about going overseas or finding something in a different town just to get us by until it kicks back in.
Forestry is the largest sector in Gisborne, making up more than 6% of the region's $2 billion GDP. Prue Younger works with the Forest Industry Contractors Association and says thousands of people are affected by the economic fallout of coronavirus as logs aren't able to be sent to China for processing.
There's a workforce of probably around 5,000 in forestry, let alone the truck drivers or the logging drivers that are associated. So, we take another 40% stab at this, and we're sort of over the 2,500.
So far, the Ministry for Social Development has handed out 6 financial hardship grants on the East Coast. There's been 32 given out across the whole country, totalling $4,837. John Ellery says he's not seen much evidence of the government's support.
I know there is the service of wage, and they're helping out people with different hardship funds, and a lot of people are dipping into KiwiSavers and stuff, but I don't know of anything from the actual government, far from going to win to get in financial assistance.
Linda Markey is the manager of Gisborne's Money Order Budgeting Services. She says more people are turning to them for help, with several inquiries from people wanting to access their KiwiSaver over the past week.
The people that we are seeing are not normally people that would go to work and income. So they're workers, and they wouldn't normally be accessing work and income and hardship assistance in that manner, but they would be accessing hardship assistance through their creditors and through the KiwiSaver withdrawal.
Economic Development Minister Phil Twyford has been visiting Tairāwhiti today and says he understands people are struggling.
There is urgency here. I spoke to people today who talked about workmates who are suicidal about this. Families being broken up, a huge stress on people who find themselves with a mortgage they can't pay, with debt to finance companies for vehicles and for the gear that they use for their jobs, that they can no longer service those payments.
But he says welfare support is available and people shouldn't have to access their KiwiSaver. Mr Twyford says anyone who is struggling financially due to the coronavirus should visit their work and income, who will do everything they can to help ease their stress. For Checkpoint, Nita Blakeperson.
Elderly are being dismissed and ignored by the government and Ministry of Health when it comes to the coronavirus response, according to the New Zealand Aged Care Association. And it's not confident district health boards are ready for an outbreak in a rest home. NZACA represents all parts of the aged care sector, providing residential services for over 65s. Its chief executive, Simon Wallace, says despite requests to urgently meet with officials to develop a national response, they've been fobbed off until they went public with their concerns.
We've been trying to engage with the district health boards and the Ministry of Health over the last week to seek reassurances from them and actually work with them on a nationally coordinated plan so that we're ready for coronavirus if we have an outbreak in a rest home.
So what's happening? Are they ignoring you?
They are ignoring us. This issue was raised by me at a national level meeting with between the aged residential care sector and DHBs on the 19th of February. I wrote to the DHBs on the 25th of February, and I only heard yesterday from the DHBs that individual approaches from individual DHBs was how they would be dealing with this. And that's been very piecemeal, that's been very patchy. My members are not getting the communication that I feel that they should be getting from their local DHBs, which is why we need a national level plan.
So what would a coordinated national response look like in your mind?
So that's about the sector, that's about the rest home sector working with the government on a plan, for example, where we can access practical things like the stockpile of equipment, that's masks, that's surgical gowns. It's assistance with our staffing. We're not necessarily resourced to deal with a big outbreak. So it's how do the public hospitals provide the support that we might need around staffing, for example.
So they have given you no assurances around additional staff should you need it, or any assurances around equipment, like protective equipment?
We haven't even had those discussions. So we haven't had those discussions, And we've seen today a case in America with a rest home where people have died and it has been linked to coronavirus. So we want to be able to work positively with these agencies so that we can minimise and manage the situation if it gets into a rest home here in New Zealand. That's all we're asking.
Are you saying we're not prepared should we get this in a rest home or a retirement village?
We are well prepared and well set up to deal with an influenza outbreak or a norovirus outbreak. But, you know, this is not business as usual with coronavirus. This is new ground, and we've seen the government close the border to some countries. And I'm raising the alarm bells today because we want to be prepared and ready.
Do you think that the government is prepared in respect to your industry?
I've not had the confidence that the district health boards are prepared, and the reason I say that is because we are a membership organisation. We are in touch with our membership daily, and it's been a very piecemeal and patchy approach from individual DHBs. So there's been engagement in some regions, but in other regions there's been simply no engagement at all.
So what's wrong with dealing directly with the DHBs in everybody's individual regions? Because that's what you're suggesting they're telling you to do.
This is coronavirus. This is a global viral outbreak. It requires a national level response, and we're prepared and ready to talk to those government agencies. And it's a far more effective way of minimising and managing the situation rather than having to deal with a whole lot of 20 individual DHBs.
You do have a concentration of vulnerable people. I mean, what do they make of all of this? How are they?
Well, we've got family members who are calling in to rest home managers and nursing staff, and they're wanting to know what sort of plans are in place. So that's where the concern is stemming from, and that's part of the reason that we're responding. Lisa, only today have I heard from the Minister. I've been asking for a meeting with the Associate Minister of Health, Jenny Salisa, who's responsible for older people, and only today, after we've brought this matter into the public, have I had a response.
So what are you saying? The day that you give them a serve is the day that the Minister picks up the phone to you?
Absolutely, and that shouldn't be the way. We are, the aged residential care sector is a mainstream part of health. We provide a valuable service. We have 35,000 beds, and we are absolutely, we need to be regarded as equal partners with the district health boards, and that's not the way that we've been treated through this.
And that is Simon Wallace. It is almost 17 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Investors from the collapsed Ross Asset Management Company have had their turn in court today as their bid to sue the ANZ Bank is wrapped up. Wellington financial advisor David Ross was jailed in 2013 for a fraud that left investors $115 million out of pocket. 550 former investors have brought a class action against the bank where Ross's accounts were held, claiming it knew or should have known the accounts were being operated illegally. Yesterday, lawyers for ANZ told the High Court in Wellington the claim lacked specifics and shouldn't proceed to trial. Today, the claim it's hit back. Business reporter Emma Hatton with the details.
The lawyer for the investors, Justin Smith QC, told the court the bank knew money from the client account was to be held for client purposes only. He said the bank should have acted when it saw that money being used for other things.
Now we have these clients of RAM paying RAM's rent, $7,900. Bank fees again, wages again, paying for the BMW again RAM's rent, $9,400. Mr. and Mrs. Ross get $881. Somebody's credit cards get paid.
Other expenses included alcohol and IT software. The bank argues the investors' claim fell short of alleging dishonesty and lacked specifics, so would not stand up in court. However, Mr. Smith says the claim is clear. He stressed that what's known as a dishonest assistance allegation only requires proof that the bank failed to stop funds it knew were not supposed to be spent.
That means that you have failed to draw the dots, failed to infer, but if the standard is that as a reasonable, honest banker in those circumstances you ought to join the dots, or that there is an implication of an unauthorised payment, then you are liable.
He added the fact the funds were being used for dishonest reasons was merely a deeper permutation. Yesterday, ANZ's lawyers said a dishonest state of mind was required in order for dishonest assistance to be alleged. However, Mr Smith said they made the threshold sound higher than what was required.
Dishonest state of mind sounds bad, it sounds criminal, but it comes down to commercial unacceptability. It certainly doesn't have the, shall we say, higher level scary connotations, which somewhat subtly and rather cleverly in my friend's submissions are designed to engender in Your Honour's mind.
Mr Smith also read out a number of excerpts from documents and emails obtained by the Financial Markets Authority related to the operation of the Ross accounts, which are suppressed by the court, to hammer his point home about why the bank was liable for dishonest assistance. Those documents were the subject of a lengthy legal battle which almost went all the way to the Supreme Court as ANZ fought against their release. The lawyer for ANZ, Neil Campbell QC, ended proceedings by reiterating the claim itself lacks specifics around the plea and that particulars are required for such serious allegations. He also asked that the ought to have known aspect of the claim be struck out at a minimum, meaning the claimants would need to prove ANZ knew it was facilitating an illegal operation. The court has reserved its decision. In Wellington for Checkpoint, Emma Hatton.
The Police Minister says officers are continuing to investigate a threat against the Muslim community and will not tolerate any extremist rhetoric. It comes after messages were posted on the encrypted messaging app Telegram on Sunday, targeting members of the Al Noor Mosque in Christchurch. The threat comes ahead of the first anniversary of the March 15th terror attack last year, which killed 51 worshippers at the Al Noor and Linwood mosques. The police have increased patrols around the mosques following the threat, a move which is being welcomed by a hero from the shootings. Anand Zaki has the story.
The Police Minister, Stuart Nash, didn't hold back as he addressed the threat made against the Muslim community, which is still reeling from last year's devastating terror attack.
Police take this very seriously. I mean, the last thing we need is either idiots or terrorists doing this sort of stuff. Take it very seriously, and we'll be making sure that this person's held to account.
Mr Nash is also confident of the security measures ahead of the first anniversary of the attack on March 15th.
They're expecting up to 80,000 people, so you can be assured that there will be adequate security in place. Police will not tolerate this sort of activity from the far right or the far left, or anyone, to be quite honest. So there are processes in place to make sure that these people are well monitored.
Canterbury Police announced today that it has increased its patrols around Masjid Al Noor and the Linwood Islamic Centre. In a statement, District Commander Superintendent John Price says the police have been in regular contact with the mosque since the attack. The police have also recently begun trialling their Eagle helicopter unit in Canterbury. Their increased patrols have been welcomed by Linwood Islamic Centre Treasurer Abdul Aziz, who chased down the alleged gunman. He heaped praise on the police's work with Muslims in the aftermath of the attack.
Actually, the police patrol always good. Since the 15th of March last year, they always in contact with us for anything. If we are seeing something suspicious or something, they always come and help us and everything.
He says the mosque leaders are keeping the Muslim community aware of any new security threats and people are taking things day by day.
What happens, we're trying our best to keep the community safe and make sure we let our community know what anything happens or anything, but we try to move on with our life, and just take it as we go.
Abdul Aziz says the increased patrols won't just benefit worshippers at the mosques, but also the wider community, as everyone is being kept safe. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Anand Zaki.
A flight school snapped up on Trade Me 5 years ago has taken off for the commercial arm of the Whanganui District Council. The New Zealand International Pilot Academy has more than doubled in size and is about to begin welcoming cadets from one of India's leading airlines into the fold. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
Whanganui Holdings bought Flight Training Manawatu for an undisclosed sum in 2015 after a board member's wife spotted it for sale online. At the time, the fielding-based pilot training school had about 40 students and 13 staff. But since rebranding as the New Zealand International Commercial Pilots Academy and relocating to a new hangar at Whanganui Airport in 2017, it has grown twofold and is estimated to be worth about $10 million a year to the city. Tanya King is the Academy's Chief Financial Officer. She says the level of growth has been unexpected.
It really has taken off at a great speed. Probably their level of growth has gone, they were at a point 2 years in where they thought they'd be approximately 5 years in. So it has grown very quickly and the reputation of NZICPA has grown quite significantly, and there is interest obviously from international students to come and train here.
Currently the Academy has about 80 students, 2/3 of whom are from overseas, predominantly India. Domestic students tend to target the 2-year diploma in aviation, which incorporates a private and commercial pilot's licence and costs between $80,000 and $100,000. International students take variations of the 1-year commercial pilot's licence, which attracts fees of between $70,000 and $90,000. Ms King says those numbers will be boosted this month by a regular intake of cadets from the subcontinent.
It's through Indigo Airways, which is based in India. They hold quite a significant portion of the domestic carrier market over there, and we are having 25 students come in every 3 months, and they come and train for 15 months, and so 25 are due to come within the next couple of weeks.
Ms King says Whanganui Holdings has bought and converted a motel and rest home to accommodate the Indigo students. Cliff McCann is the head of operations for the commercial arm of the Academy. He says the Whanganui Airport is perfect for a flight school.
Training in an uncontrolled airspace environment like this has real advantages early on, but then we also have the ability to very quickly, in a short matter of time, introduce them to the more complicated controlled airspace such as Palmerston, Wellington, Hamilton, Nelson and further afield.
Mr McCann says the Academy has about 20 planes, the majority of them Cessnas.
We have a range of 172s from basic sort of analogue panels through to full glass cockpits. So the students are taken in a graduated training process right from zero through to quite a sophisticated cockpit by the time they leave here and fairly fully equipped licence.
Mr McCann says the wraparound care international students got at the Academy is one of its main attractions. Cheyenne Chakraborty of Bangalore has no regrets about landing in Whanganui.
First of all, we have over 6 runways in Whanganui, and the traffic here is diverse. So you get a handful experience of almost every type of aircraft with, airliners like Chatham's coming in and general aircraft like us and Aero Club and various people from all around New Zealand coming in here for their cross countries and stuff.
And 19-year-old Matika Agrawal has got over her initial reservations.
I never thought that I'll be coming to New Zealand for my aviation training, but then my dad, he takes care of things and everything, so he decided the best place for me to do my flight training is New Zealand.
And how do you like living in a small town like Whanganui?
At the beginning I thought that the place is quite boring, but now I'm enjoying. I'm used to the weather and stuff, and people here are really helpful and nice.
The results of a $400,000 business case study funded by the Provincial Growth Fund for an advanced flight simulator centre at the airport, catering for 288 students, are due to be complete in the next 3 months. I Whanganui mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Robin Martin aho.
Right, let's go back to a story we had earlier in the program. This was about the $1 Pizza Hut pizza promotion, which has really got the backup of David Latali, who is a fitness trainer and life coach. It's being offered around the area of Otara, and he says it's not on that low-income families are being targeted where there are also high levels of obesity. Well, Pizza Hut has got back to us and says, to celebrate our new Pizza Hut store in Papatoetoe, we are offering $1 large pizza deals to customers within the surrounding suburbs. Our $1 deal only runs from Tuesday through to Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and is limited to one per customer only. And they go on to say that we have opened stores using similar promotions in the past. So much feedback on this one. So here's some of it. Kirsty, who is a GP in Kaitaia, has got in touch to say, I couldn't agree more with your speaker. She's meaning David Latali. Practically every new shop that has opened in our town in recent times has been for fast food. There should be a requirement to get a licence to open these places, just as there is to open liquor outlets. Somebody else, though, says healthy food is not expensive. People need to start thinking for themselves and query false social media news. We need to get real and stop blaming other people in organisations for all our so-called problems. Patrick says $1 pizzas, taxpayers via the government will and are paying for the health effects of cheap and poor quality food. The government needs to step up and restrict the exploitation of vulnerable people. The same argument can be applied to money trucks and loan sharks. However, someone else says Pizza Hut can't be responsible for the consistent choices of the underprivileged. If a $1 pizza for lunch gives a family reprieve from a few days of hunger, the amount of carbs in the pizza will keep hungry kids happy for a day. That's okay. Pizza Hut isn't the authority on healthy eating. Another person says impoverished communities will buy cheap. Government could fund $1 veggie and fruit and rice packs. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Economic Development Minister says the COVID-19 outbreak has had a savage impact on the forestry industry. The government hopes to bring forward some projects to create new jobs for those put out of work. The US Democratic presidential hopeful Joe Biden has received a flurry of endorsements ahead of the crucial Super Tuesday primary votes. And the Justice Minister, Andrew Little, says he's quietly confident abortion reform legislation will pass its second reading tonight, though by a smaller margin. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7, then it's Nights with Brian Crump.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
And it's so heartbreaking to imagine what that's going to look like when we're already seeing infrastructure that's not being upkept and councils not being funded properly to, implement good sewerage systems.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
I believe that the manufacturing index for